Jingle, 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 jingle.
How to acquire property or land, what are the steps?
And how to do things the right way. The buyer must engage a notary. I forgot what it stands for.
I was about to ask you that.
JBs. That's where it becomes interesting. The reason why the letter of intent is very used.
You might lose the deal.
There's always two ways. There aren't that many gray areas, to be honest. It's pretty straightforward. Can I sign a document if I'm abroad? All right.
Okay, yeah. Omri, here we are.
Hi.
Well
Again.
done. Another podcast, another week. And this is your last week in Bali, yeah?
It is. Moving to Dubai. I mean, I guess when this podcast is out, I'll be already in Dubai.
Yeah. So it's been a bit busy, a bit stressful, moving, selling, all those kinds of
I
things.
have so many things to sell.
Contact us if you need a dresser or a bed or a vanity light or something.
Or land.
So yeah, land. So we're talking about land today. How to acquire property or land, what are the steps, and then also the timeline of the steps, because not a lot of people are aware of like the process and how it works and how things unfold really when you buy a property. So yeah, we got a little list and we'll put it on the website. And over to you, Sam.
All right. Hi, guys. So we're going to do the jingle first, maybe?
Yeah, there you go.
But hi, everyone. I'll talk after the jingle. Thank you. Hi, Gawain.
Hello, Omri.
Good to see you again.
Once again, yes.
All right, so today we're going to talk about something that I'm always asked by people that either coming to Bali for the first time or acquiring a land for the first time, or land or a property, whatever it is. It can be a villa, can be a shop, can be whatever. The process is the same, whether you're buying a land or a villa or any other type of property. And there's a legal process. There are 9 points. We'll talk about each one of them, some briefly, some more in depth. And so everyone understand what is the actual process and how to do things the right way.
So when does the process actually start? After you've found...
So we're only going to talk about what happens after the handshake, so to speak. Okay. Once you've, and that's the first, thank you, Gawain. So the first point of this PDF here is the verbal agreement on terms with property owner or the lessor. So everything after that comes, this is the handshake. You say, okay, I agree with the terms. I'm going to buy your land at this price for so many years with that extension and whatever.
So typically it's through an agent already, sales agent. You've seen the land that you like on their website. You reach out, you contact them. They put you in touch with
All that is done.
So it's done,
All that is done. Whether it's an agent, whether it's a direct owner, it doesn't matter. We are not going to talk about that now. We're not going to talk about, and we've gone at lands through like extension, how to deal with the best extension, make the best extension deal, and so on and so forth. We have podcasts on that, so you can go and check out on YouTube. But just once we are actually moving forward, what happens then? So, number one, again, verbal agreement on terms with property owner and lessor. This is the handshake, yeah? Number two, the buyer must engage a notary. Sellers might propose you a buyer. You can go with them. I know we do that as well because we a lot of our buyers don't know any notary here. But it's ultimately the choice of the buyer to pick their own notary. Understand something quick, quick note on notaries. They are not lawyers. So lawyers pick sides. Notaries are impartial. So whether it's a notary from the buyer, from the seller, from whoever, a notary, hypothetically, but again, there are a lot of corruption in this country, unfortunately, and some notaries are corrupted, and it's a well-known fact. But hypothetically, notaries are impartial, so they are protecting the best interests of all sides, not only the one that brought them to the table. Now, regarding payments, notaries are typically paid by the buyer. Okay, and it's usually a fee of 1% of the total deal. So if you have let's say 2 billion rupiah deal, then the notary would get 20 million. It's a 1% of the deal. Okay, so engage a notary. Point number 2. Point number 3, sign a letter of intent, LOI. It can be also called MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. Or when it's a freehold, it's called in Bahasa, PPJB. I forgot what it stands for.
Yeah, I was about to ask you that.
JB is Jual Beli and sales and purchase, but I forgot the PP, what it means in Bahasa.
So the notary would have set that up. So you engage the notary, then they draft a letter of agreement on the verbal handshake. Yeah?
So, all right, yeah, okay. So that's where it becomes interesting. There's a twist. It's usually the right way to do things is for the notary to do a pre-lease agreement, yeah, which can be like a lease agreement, but one step before.
Before, yeah.
Okay.
So just the terms, main terms.
Now
yeah.
the thing is, common practice. Usually, if you go through an agent, the agent will make you sign the letter of intent. Okay. So it's an agency letterhead paper with all the terms and conditions of the deal, and you sign it, and then you transfer to the notary, for instance, the escrow notary, some down payment, whatever. We're getting into that in a second. But there's 2 ways of doing this. So point number 3, either you have a letter of intent, which is done by the agency, the real estate agency. It can be also done by between the parties.
So buyer or seller could do it.
Yeah, I mean, you just say, okay, I, Omri, agree to acquire this land for this price at this date, blah, 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 with a summary of the conditions. And I sign it, the other party sign it, so the seller sign it, and we have this. And that's legal, okay? So either this or you go to a notary, and this is the right way, yeah? You go to a notary and they start drafting the pre-lease agreement. Now, the reason why the letter of intent is very used as opposed to a pre-lease agreement is a matter of to draft the pre-lease agreement. All parties it's a very, very long document. So it's basically a lease agreement, with just a due diligence input in there, factored in. Yeah?
Oh, okay. So what happens?
What happens if and so on and so forth. So it takes time. So and sellers and Bali is a very liquid market, yeah. So it's a risk that you would take. The deal is not locked in until there is some money in the escrow and some agreement is signed. Okay.
So if you go down a rabbit hole on terms, you might lose the deal.
So if you're making a very, very large deal, you want to do the proper way. Okay. So you go to the notary and they start a pre-lease agreement or pre-sale agreement if it's a freehold, and then all parties agree. It takes a bit of time, but everything is done, square and fair.
Yeah.
But I know for myself, for instance, most of the time, 90% of the time, even for a larger deal, because we know the market well and we know the people, we just do a letter of intent. Okay, so that letter of intent is signed, all parties have signed. Come to point number 4, which happens exactly at the same time at signature. Pay deposit into escrow to lock the deal. You have 2 ways of doing this again. There's always 2 ways.
Multiple.
The right way is to give a deposit, what is agreed upon in the letter of intent. It's usually around 10%, between 10 and 30%, yeah? Usually 10%. It's a good faith, yeah? If your deal is 2 billion rupiah, then you would put 200 million rupiah into the notary escrow account. Your money is protected. Your money stays there. And if there is any issues down the road with the due diligence or with some land documents or the certificate or any kind of issues, then the money goes back to you. So it's a third party that's ensure with impartiality that the money is safe, yeah?
So you could go to a notary and say, oh, listen, the access is a little bit too small or too narrow. This is not what I want. I don't want to do this deal anymore. And the notary will go, okay, fine.
You cannot do that.
Okay.
You cannot do that. But in your example, you couldn't do that because that should be stated. If there is any issue with the access, for instance, if you don't know if the access is valid or not, it should be stated in a letter of intent. So it will be stated, okay, we have this deal with so many years, what price, and so on and so forth, and that deal is contingent on us finding out the viability of the access, for instance.
Okay.
But you cannot come back and say, I changed my mind. I'm going to buy a bigger truck. So that access is too small and I don't like the color of the grass. You can't do that,
A lot of gray areas in that whole thing. I can imagine some arguments have...
There are some arguments, but there aren't that many gray areas, to be honest. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
It's either the documents are... so now we're talking about due diligence, yeah? It's another topic. We can do a podcast on that.
I think we have, kind of.
We did with
Notary,
with Emilia the notary, yeah? But it's pretty straightforward. In the diligence, in a nutshell, they take the notary takes the document, she checks the zoning, she checks if the land is used as collateral at the bank, for instance, for a loan, checks if the paperwork is in order.
Who owns it?
All kinds of legalities around the land. But if the access is accessible, if there is actually an access, who does the access belong to? Is there a right of access, or is the access part of the land? And so on and so forth. And once all is checked, and then the deal can go through, You can't change your mind and say...
make something up.
There's not enough sun on the land.
Okay.
All right, okay, so you've paid the deposit into the escrow. The deal is locked in for you. Now, number 5. So now that's the due diligence. Okay, so we just talked about that. But usually it takes between 1 to 3 weeks. I would say in most cases 1 week when it's simple. Sometimes it's complicated. Complicated means, I'll give you an example. A lot of the lands in Bali anyway, the name on the certificate, on the deed, on the certificate of the land, is the father or the grandfather. And who have passed away. And the land is sold by the heirs, And so in many, many cases, and it happened to me many, many times, I bought lands where to a family, but the name on the certificates, the dude is dead. It's normal, it's okay, it's no problem, but you just need more paperwork for that. You need heritage documents from the government, whatever. And those are documents that are usually issued in a couple of weeks. So sometimes the family doesn't have it because they didn't think about it or whatever. So that can be the complication.
But don't they have to...
That makes the due diligence a bit more...
There have to be a transfer of that property from the grandfather who's deceased to the children, no?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tax liabilities and all that kind of thing. Okay.
So change on the certificate is not necessarily done right away, but at least a heritage paper that says the heirs of this land are this guy.
Okay.
But usually it takes about 1 week to get the due diligence done in Bali. And it's pretty. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah. So point number 6, as we are doing this. So point number 6 happened actually as we start the due diligence. The draft of the lease agreement for leasehold and for freehold is called AGB, and I know what it means. It means Acta Jual Belli, the act of for selling and buying. Yeah. We go back to point number 3. Remember, you can do either a letter of intent or a pre-lease agreement. So point number 6, the draft, the lease agreement will be basically that pre-lease agreement from which will be removed all the due diligence, contingency, and so on and so forth, because it's already done.
Solved, yeah.
Okay. So this is a document in Bahasa. What will happen for our foreigner viewers here is that the notary will show it to you in Bahasa, but also in English. Sometimes there's 2 columns with English and Bahasa, but ultimately the official document is only in Bahasa Indonesia. So what you see from the notary is a translation done by the notary, so it's notarized, so to speak. It's official, so you can trust it. And you have all the information about the land, about who the first party is, the second party, third, fourth, fifth party, whatever, how many there are. And all the condition, basically what's written in the LOI, but a little bit more developed. Yeah. And that's if you've done a LOI. If you have done a pre-lease agreement, it's basically a copycat of the pre-lease agreement from which you have removed what happened in case of due diligence goes wrong or whatever, yeah? So that's number 6. So how does it work? It works on WhatsApp, usually. You need WhatsApp in Indonesia. Notary sends you the drafts of the lease agreement. She or he sends it also to the other party, to the seller. And both parties must agree to the same version, of course. So a lot of time there are small modifications. And when everyone agrees, then we go to the signing, okay? Which is number 7. If you are subleasing a land from a party that is different, from someone that's different from the owner of the land. Let's say I lease a land from some local person, local owner, and then you, Gawain, like my land or half my land or a part of my land, and I'm subleasing to you a piece of my land, yeah?
I was about to ask you this exact question.
In that very case, you are going to inherit the conditions, the terms and conditions from the master lease, we call it the master lease then, that I have with my owner. Okay? I'm doing one this week, actually. I'm subleasing a land to someone, and he's inheriting the conditions from the master lease I have with the original owner of the land. And there's no nego there. Yeah, there's no Omri. Can you do 1 more year? No, I can't. I don't have the ability to do it because I already signed something. So you just buy in whatever I've signed previously with the owner. Yeah.
Could you get the original lessor to go back to the owner and try and negotiate an extension?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
You could get the lessee or me. In my case, for example, I could go to the owner and say, look, I have a client. He wants to buy, the land I'm selling, I'm subleasing now is 41.5 years. I can go back to the lessor, so the owner, and say, look, I need 50 years. Just give me 9 more years, 8.5 more years. But that's either I would change my master lease or I would make an addendum.
But directly with the original landowner.
So master lease for me, addendum with the original landowner, and the lessee, my lessee, the person I'm subleasing the land to, would sign a one contract with both those things inside. So now number 7. So once everyone has agreed to the terms and conditions of the lease agreement, so buyer and seller, all parties, then you sign the lease agreement in front of a notary. If the seller and buyer cannot be in the same room at the same time, it can be done within the same day. Notary can go to the seller, can go to the buyer, as long as it's on the same day, it's done.
Oh, okay, same day. Okay.
Yeah.
And how does it usually work? Do the seller and buyer go to the notary's office, or the notary comes to them?
Usually go to the notary office.
Okay.
Yeah, in our
except
case,
for you.
It's a bit different. Except for me.
We have a notary rocking up every few days.
As a desk here, basically. Yeah. Okay, so we sign the lease agreement or the AGB, Acta Jual Beli, in front of the notary. Then at the same time, it's number 8, but at the same time, it's usually on the same day. You do the balance payment, not into it. So at that time, I forgot something. We forgot to write number 5, due diligence by notary. We forgot, to write number 6.5. Okay,
6.1.
6.1. You sign the lease agreement, of course, when the due diligence is green lighted.
Sure. Yeah.
And at that time, whatever is in escrow can be released to the seller. Okay. And then afterward, you sign, and at the time of the signature, you pay the balance payment, whatever, so the 90% balance, directly to the seller, not to the notary, to the seller.
It doesn't have to be 90%. It can be a payment term of the year or whatever.
It can be anything. Yeah, whatever hasn't been paid or whatever is agreed upon.
Terms.
Number 8, balance payments. Usually there is flexibility. There is it's called a grace period. So you don't have to do the payments like right away, as soon as the document is signed. Usually you have like 7 working days or 14 working days or whatever is agreed upon as a grace period. It's called grace period. Yeah. and you have to do the payment within that time frame. Otherwise, everything you've paid before can be lost, and you lose your money. And the deal is cancelled. Yeah. And then number 9, so it's finished. Okay, the deal is sealed, it's signed, everybody is happy with their money. Obtain the final official lease agreement, or in the case of freehold, the certificate. It takes a few days or a couple of weeks or 1 week, or whatever, to get the document that you sign usually have sometimes small amendments on the spot, and the notary just write them with a pencil, and you sign on every single amendment. So it means you agree. And then there's a final document, which is in a carton cover with a notary seal and a lot of fluff, and that's your official lease agreement, and you get it usually a couple of weeks later or something like that. Yeah?
And the notary keeps that. Is it lodged anywhere else other than?
Well, the notary can keep it, but they rather for the client to take it. But usually, the notary let you know when it's ready, and you can come to the notary office and pick it up. You cannot send someone; it has to be you, and you pick it up, and then you have your lease agreement. You put it wherever you want, at the bank. I don't know. Yeah. And it's in the case of a freehold, that's when the certificate name change starts. And depending where you do it, can take a couple of months, 3 months, depends if it's in Bali, if it's in Lembongan, in Sumba, in Jakarta, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back. We finished all those points. Any questions?
No, I think we covered it all off, yeah.
Let's go on the remote thing, okay? So the big question is, can I sign a document if I'm abroad? Yes, it's possible. It's possible if both parties are abroad, or if one of the parties is abroad.
So it's possible.
It's possible.
It's only 2 parties.
Yeah, let me explain why. There's a differentiation between the seller and the buyer. In Indonesian law, the one that has the most to lose is the seller, okay? Because he's losing his land, yeah? The one that is the most scammable, so to speak, is the seller, because he's selling, he has something physical to lose, yeah? The seller always need to be physically present at any signature. Now, if it cannot be present at the time of the final signature, he can do what we call a POA, power of attorney. So he basically gives his power to someone else, to a friend, a relative,
anybody.
Anybody, yeah? And to do that, in order to do that, he needs to be present to do the power of attorney.
Okay.
So
he has to be present sometime.
Either you're present during the signature, or you're present, physically present with the notary, same room, at the time of the power of attorney. Okay? For the buyer, everything can be done online. Doesn't have to be present.
Okay.
Okay? Because the buyer is giving money, right? So he's losing something. Like he's not that you cannot scam someone and give them $200,000. Now, what happens if a buyer can really not be present? If the buyer is abroad,
in Alaska,
it's possible. In that case, the buyer. So there's a power of attorney. Okay, it's a document. It's a 1-2 page document that says, I, Omri, ben-canaan, give my power of attorney to Gawain, Blizzard, in order to do that specific action on my behalf and sell that land to that person and so on.
Well, you can do it long term, I presume, years or multiple property deals.
For land deals, it's more complicated.
Oh, so it's usually just one deal.
Things, it's a deal. It's a deal per deal. So if you are, for example, if I have to go to Alaska, where I go often, as we all know, then, or if I'm in Alaska or in France or wherever, I can still do that deal remotely, but I have to go to a notary in Alaska. Okay, why do you say Alaska? I say France. I'm French. Yeah, I have to go to a notary in France and get that power of attorney legalized with apostille. Apostille is a little stamp thing, yeah? Sent by FedEx or by whatever to the notary in Bali. And once has that paper, the deal can go through.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. So possible.
Yeah.
Headache, but possible.
Headache, but possible. That's it. I think we've covered everything.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah,
it was
a
good.
quick one. I think it's important. I mean, I'm asked the questions all the time. Now it's great. I can say, hey, just click on that link. You know?
No, I mean, the idea came from the meeting that you had the other day, and you went through these exact things, and it was informative for everybody. So, good podcast idea.
All right. Well.
Yeah. Please, if you got any more ideas or any information or anything, just let us know. Questions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Yeah.
All right, click on the links, subscribe, all that blah, blah,
we
blah.
just hit 25,000 subscribers, so thanks for that. And we're onward and upward to 35 or 50 or whatever.
We are, we just 25, I think, 2 days ago. Something. If you're interested in the Kedungu Fund, which is the real estate fund we're running in Kedungu, feel free to reach out. We'll gladly sit down and have a coffee with you guys or on the phone, or, you know. Yeah. We just opened, big news, we just opened the school in Kedungu. We opened the school called Grow in Kedungu, so you can go on growinkedungu.com, and it's a K to 6, kindergarten to 6th grade school. It was very, very, very complicated. It's a 1.5 year effort, team effort. And we just, the year just started last week, August 11. Very proud, very happy.
Yeah, it looks great. The school looks great. Little kids running around, all colorful, with goats and all kinds of things. It's great. Go and look at the socials.
There's a farm.
There's a farm.
Hey, you want your kids to run on with goats? Come and roll in Grow.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. But it's looking great. So congratulations. I think great job.
With that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys. See you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Gawain, thank you.
Cheers, yeah.